Okay, another day, another video. Well, this is a series of 3 videos. This is the second of the 3. This is a unit that's going to be coming out. In the first video was the unboxing of the replacement. This video is going to be doing some tests on this one. The third video will be seeing whether the replacement is any better. So the main difference between the replacement and this one is that the replacement has got extra memory. This one's got 2 GB of memory, replacement has got 4. So we'll see whether that makes things any quicker. I'm going to turn it on, car on now, car is now on. Okay, so you should now see the display come up. And you can probably try doing this at home, but you should find that it takes about 47 seconds before the unit is actually on and accepting key presses. So whether that will be any quicker with a 4 GB unit, that's one of the things we're going to be seeing. Apologies if the display is a little bit oversaturated. I'm not sure how well it's going to come across on the video. I tried filming at night just to make the display a bit clearer, but it might be that it's not going to come across that well. Okay, so it takes around about 47 seconds before it gets to that stage. At this point, you can now start to go into the various apps, and so you can now go into Waze. Then you can start putting in the postcode and so on. Right, what I want to do though is there's a couple of apps that I want to go on here. Hopefully it should come across well enough for you to see. One of them is device check. So if I press on that, okay, not sure if you can see the display that well. Hopefully you can now. It's going to be a little bit difficult while it starts to figure out the focusing, but there's a couple of things I wanted to sort of show you with this. If you look down there, it says it's Android 9 Pie, which is quite interesting because Xtrons tends to advertise it's been Android 11. Is it Android 9 or is it Android 11? Looking here, it's 2 GB of RAM, which is correct. It is, as far as I know, a 2 GB machine, and it's 32 GB of storage. That's probably a little bit clearer. So if I go up again, you can see Android 9 down there and 2 GB of RAM. And at the moment, it's doing nothing other than running this app. But it's saying that 1.2 GB of RAM is being used. So when this unit is in idle, it's still using about 1 GB of RAM. The reason why that might be interesting is because if you bought a 1 GB Android Head unit, this is a 2 GB one and it's already using over 1 GB. So I'm pretty sure that a 1 GB Android unit is really going to be struggling. Go into hardware. You can see a bit about the processor. I'm going to assume that's correct. Few other things. Display resolution, it says 1280 by 720, giving a screen density of 160 ppi. Then it says underneath 240 dpi. Not sure. Oh, okay, yeah. Dots per inch, yes. So the only thing I'm a bit curious about that is because Xtrons itself says that this screen has 600 vertical pixels, whereas that says the display is 720. It is correct, it is a 16:9 screen, and the refresh rate, okay, I'm going to go with 60 Hz. Right, if we go into the RAM again, 2 GB of RAM, 1.23 GB used. Also seems to have 1 MB of display RAM with a little bit of that used. 32 GB storage, that should be correct. The replacement is 64 GB of storage. And that there, no, sorry, not that one. Some details about Bluetooth. Come back. Yeah, there is actually a SD card fitted, so yes, 128GB storage. That's the one that's holding all the music, so that's correct. It says it's VFAT file system, block size 32KB. Okay, yeah, that's fine. And yeah, most of that is used. So, system, yes, it says it's an Xtrons unit, which it is. And again, Android 9 Pie, which, again, I'm sort of wondering, is this genuinely Android 9 and Xtrons is claiming it's a later volume of Android, or is it that Device Check thinks it's Android 9, or how is it working? Not that it really matters. It doesn't really matter what head unit, doesn't really matter what operating system the head unit is using, because it's just a car's head unit. It's not a phone, it's not a tablet. It just needs to do a few things. We'll come back onto that in a bit. Right, battery is going to say 100%, but that's because it's running off the car's battery, so, and the car's battery is fine. I wouldn't go worry too much about that. Wi-Fi, it is actually picking up my Wi-Fi even at this distance, so that's fine. And then we got apps, cameras, and whatever else. But the main thing I wanted to sort of take from Device Check was that this has 32GB of storage. It's got 2GB of RAM. It's saying it's Android 9. Okay. It takes about 47 seconds for the unit to boot up. So let's go back to the top screen. And then the next thing I want to do is run Geekbench 5. This is going to take a while, so right, but something to note here, Geekbench thinks it's Android 11, which is what Xtrons claims it is. So who's correct? Right, let's run a CPU benchmark. Come on, there we go. Okay, this is going to take a while, so I might have to do a bit of editing and so on. Right, you can see that 2% there. Oh, get a little bit blurry. I'm going to just pause for a second. Okay, I'm not sure how successful that's going to be, but I've tried to fix the camera via a Gorilla Pod onto the steering wheel just to try to hold it still. Right, so anyway, but what I want to talk about while the Geekbench is running, and we'll get an answer in a bit as to how good or bad this unit is. By the way, spoiler alert, it's not going to be brilliant. Your smartphone and your tablet is going to probably be more powerful than this head unit. This is sort of why I wanted to talk about a little bit about the operating system, why it doesn't really matter. So there's probably about 3 main things that you want your car's head unit to do. You might want to do some other things, but there's about 3 main things. First thing is you're going to want to play music. So this unit it's got an AM/FM radio that's built in. It's got a DAB radio plugged into the back via a USB. There's a DAB adapter. So that's a little bit out of focus. Right, so yeah, we'll let it run that. Right, so it's got a radio. You can also use, you can go to do digital internet radio services via Wi-Fi or via your phone creating a Wi-Fi for the head unit. So you can also get radio stations that way. It's got a micro SD card, which is just down here. Just so you can see that. Right, so just there, put the light on. Right, you've got a micro SD card in there. This one's a 128GB micro SD card. That, I normally have about 250 folders of music on that. It plays MP3, FLAC, Windows Media Audio, whichever system that you want to, whatever audio format you've got, it pretty much can run that. I normally use Power Amp to play music. Then after that, you might want to have Spotify, you might want to Bluetooth music from your phone, you might want to have music plugged into an auxiliary input, right? But all of that I would expect a modern head unit to do, to take music and play it back somehow through your head unit. So this head unit got all that lot covered, not a problem. The only thing it won't do is it's not going to play your old kit like a CD, because it's not got a CD player built in. You'd have to plug it in via auxiliary input or something. So that's one thing that I'd expect my head unit to do, to play music from whatever format possible. Second thing, somebody phones you up, and then you press a button and then you can talk hands-free. On this unit, again, if I just put the light on for a second, there is a microphone that's just built in there. I found that to be good enough, so I've not bothered attaching an auxiliary microphone. Sometimes I have to sit slightly forward, but for the amount of calls that I get, it's not a huge amount of calls. So can this handle calls hand-free? Yeah, it does that, no problem. So, or even if you don't want to answer the call, at least you can see that someone did try to call you. So that's the second thing I would expect from a modern head unit. Third thing is navigation. This has got Google Maps, it's got Waze. I'm pretty sure you can put other apps on here if you want, but Google Maps and Waze, they both work fine on this unit. That's about the three main things I would expect from a car's head unit. You could do other things. You could, for instance, you could watch Netflix on this if you wanted, or YouTube videos. I've not tried Netflix. It does play YouTube videos. You might wonder, why do you want to watch YouTube videos on a car's head unit? Surely you can't watch while you're driving. No, but if you are parked up, maybe your partner is shopping, something like that, while you're waiting, well, you could watch a YouTube video if you wanted, or something from Netflix if that was what you wanted to do. Or of course you got your phone that can do that anyway. So that's about the three main things I would expect from a car's head unit. This does other things, like it can monitor tyre pressures. I haven't got that set up. It will, if I put the car into reverse, it uses this as a screen, so that's useful. That fact has been incredibly useful. It can do information, diagnostic information on your car's engine, things like that, but all that's just nice to have. As for the three main things that I would expect from a head unit, it does those three things. Now, if you think back to the original iPhone, that could do navigation, that could play music, that could answer calls. And I think the original iPhone was probably just over a decade ago. So if you had the original iPhone being able to do those three things, and this head unit can do those things, does it really matter whether it's Android 9 or Android 11 or Android whatever? I would say probably not, because really, whichever version of Android it is, it can do those things. So I think some manufacturers, they might claim that their 1GB £80 head unit from AliExpress can do all of these things and more. I'd sort of question it. Oh, and while having Android 12, I'd probably question, probably not Android 12. I don't know, or maybe they have, but if they have, it must run painfully slow. Right, you don't need to have the latest version of Android. And 1GB of RAM, I mean, this head unit has got 2, and I find it a little sluggish, which is why I'm upgrading it. You can just see we're now halfway through Geekbench 5, and it's still, how long have we got now? I think it's been running for maybe coming up to 10 minutes, something like that. So the idea is that when we get this unit replaced, then we'll run the same apps on the new unit. And so the things I'm looking for is, when I turn the key, will it be any quicker? what will device check say as to what Android version it is, or anything else, or how much RAM is being used, and will Geekbench 5 run any better? I'm guessing Geekbench is actually testing the processor rather than the memory, but will the memory make a difference? Which is really what I was sort of asking. Does 2 gigabytes, if you're going to 4 gigabytes, does 4 gigabytes matter over 2? Okay, next consideration. Don't know. Something else that I was wondering. Again, I don't know until I put the new unit in and we start having a look. But if you was to have if this was a Windows computer and it was running Windows XP and it had 1 gigabyte of RAM, it would run fine. But 1 gigabyte of RAM running on a Windows 11 probably wouldn't run at all. So if the unit that replaces this actually has got a later version of Android on it, it might bring a few more features of Android to the table, like being able to do picture-in-picture and whatever else. But then it might need that extra memory, and whether that will slow it down, I don't know. So that's something I'm wondering, in that, has the 4 gigabyte head unit got a later version of Android, so it's like 1 step forward, 2 steps back, in that it's got more memory, but then it's trying to run a more technical operating system, so maybe that's the thing. The other thing is, talking about memory doesn't actually make your computer any faster. What happens is that your computer's speed is mainly governed by the speed and performance of the processor. If you've got not enough memory, that is making your computer hang back in speed, because it's a bit like if you had a car that could go at 70 miles an hour, but the car was being held back because it was towing a big rock chain to the back of the car. Then your car can go at 70 miles an hour, but it's being hampered by the fact it's dragging the rock. It's a similar thing with a computer if it's not got enough memory, in that your computer should be running at the speed that it would like to run at, but because it's lacking in memory, it's having to hang around because of the lack of memory. That's a bottleneck, it's slowing it down. If you then add more memory to that computer, you're not making the computer run faster. What you're doing is making the computer run at the speed that it should have run at all along. Not sure if that makes sense, but by adding more memory, it should make the computer run quicker, in the sense of it should be smoother, and it's not being held back by a lack of memory. If Geekbench is actually testing processor speed and things like that, then if it's the same processor, it shouldn't make much of a difference. There is some other differences between the two head units I've noticed. One is that they seem to have changed the amplifier chip. The chip in the 4 gigabyte version looks slightly different to this one, and it actually looks very slightly more powerful. Whether that's noticeable, I don't know. What I'm going to do now, I'm just going to pause again, and then we'll wait until this is actually finished. Okay, we're hopefully on the home stretch now, so it's nearly there. I'm sort of assuming something a little bit. I have noticed there are some people who've tried to run Geekbench on some Android head units and then found that some of these apps either won't run at all, or they crash part way through. Whether someone's rather clever and they've managed to sort of realise, oh, the thing's been benchmarked, we can't have that, because they maybe don't want software running on it to actually see whether the hardware is any good or not. Maybe that's something, but on the other hand, this sort of thing, running tests and so on, does actually tend to task the unit. So if you're running benchmarks, you are actually giving it a bit of a workout. So maybe some units, they just get too hot and that's why it crashes. You can sort of see we're nearly there. I have actually run Geekbench once before on this unit just to see whether it did actually work at all. and it did. I can't remember the results, but I want to just check on the results again, because hopefully Geekbench will actually run on its replacement, and then after that we can then check. Oh, here we go. So what have we got? Here we go. So a single core score of 139, multi-core score 422. Okay, again it says that this is Android 11, though Device Check said it was Android 9. It says it's an Xtrons unit, which is correct. It says it's got one processor, 8 cores, ARM architecture. Apologies. Base frequency 2 gigahertz. Memory, it says, is 1.86 gigabytes. Single core score 139. Crypto score 281, integer score 148, floating point score 96. And you can have a look at some of the sort of results there. Okay, and what we're going to do is in the third video, to be honest, a lot of this, apologies, it's a bit dry. I've just been sort of recovering from a bit of an illness. So let's go into that. Right, so if we have a look, it says that the Xtrons device is 139, whereas if you were to compare to a Samsung Galaxy S21, just a second. Sorry, the throat is very dry. I haven't been too well. There we go. So you can sort of see that most modern smartphones, okay, I mean there's a S20 which I used to have, so this head unit is on 139. Just about every major smartphone is at least a few times faster than it. Okay, again, multi-core comparison, you can see that in comparison to just about every smartphone going, they're all leaving it in the dust. Not a major problem. It's a head unit, not a smartphone. It's really only here to play music and stuff like that, but you can sort of get an idea that if you're expecting to come from a smartphone to a head unit, particularly if you're buying one of the cheaper ones or one of the low-end ones, you might find your head unit is sluggish. Not a big deal if all you're doing is playing music and navigation, but big deal if you was planning on doing anything more higher end than that. Okay, so that's benchmark results from Geekbench. And I think that's going to be it. I'm just going to go back to Device Check again. I believe this actually had a benchmark in it. Should we run that benchmark? Why not? So let's try this. Okay, let's come up with a result. Let's have a look at the memory. These seem to be far less intensive, but I am actually interested, particularly in the memory one, whether they've actually changed the memory. This particular model is about 2 years old. Whether the later unit is the same, not sure if you can see that. Okay, and storage. Right, we'll compare this when we run, when we have the new unit fitted. Might be the same, might not, I'm not sure. If it's very close, it probably is the same. Okay, hopefully you can see the results for those. rankings. Well, in fact, I'm not going to worry too much about that. Let's come out of that. CPU looks a little bit warmer, but it's been running benchmarks, so not a big deal with that. And I think that will do. I think we've sort of, I'm not sure if there's any more tests. No, don't need to know, as they're mainly, I think, designed for a phone, not for this. Okay, in fact, CPU analysis. Let me just look at Bluetooth. I'm not sure if Bluetooth ever got, no, it's a pair of devices. Don't need to know that. I'm just interested. I'm not sure what version of get back. Not sure what version of Bluetooth was actually originally installed on this and whether it's changed. I think it's the memory is one I'm going to be most interested in, but I don't think there's any benchmarks for it. Doesn't matter. I think that will do for now. Next video will be fitting the new unit, and then from that testing that one and see if anything has changed. That's it.